This is section 4 in chapter 1, and I'm going to break it down into 3 different videos over the course of 3 different days because it's lengthy and nobody wants to listen to me for that long. By the end of this first video, part A, you should be able to do these 4 different things. Tell me the kind or type of polynomial, state the degree of a polynomial, and then add and subtract polynomials. Okay, a monomial is a single term. So an example of a monomial would be 6x squared or x to the 4th, negative 3x, anything like that. A combination of variables, exponents, and coefficients. A binomial is just 2 of them put together. So you might have 6x squared minus 3. That would be a binomial because there are 2 terms. And a trinomial, just as the name suggests, is 3 put together. So 5x to the 4th minus 8xy plus 7. That would be an example of a trinomial. The overall term for monomials, binomials, trinomials, and anything larger is a polynomial, because poly means many. So an example of one would be 5x to the 7th minus 8x to the 5th plus 3x to the 3rd minus 8. Since there are 4 terms, this, instead of calling it like a quadnomial or something, they call it polynomial. The degree is the highest exponent. So in this particular polynomial, I have exponents of 3, 5, and 7 is the largest, so my degree is 7. This polynomial has 2 exponents, 2 and a 4. The largest is 4, and so our degree is 4. Are either of these expressions polynomial? The answer to the first is no, because 1 over x is really x to the negative 1. And in polynomials you can only have positive exponents. The answer to the second expression is also no, because although it is the quotient of 2 polynomials, one on top, one in the denominator, it is still not a polynomial. If we're adding 2 polynomials together, we're going to be combining like terms. Now remember, to be a like term, you have to have the same variable and the same exponent. If you don't have those, then they are not like terms. So in our example, I have an 8x cubed and a negative 2x cubed, and so those two we're going to add the coefficients of. Whenever I'm combining like terms, the exponents stay the same. So 8 plus negative 2, or you can think of it as 8 minus 2, is 6x to the 3rd. My next term is a squared term, and I notice that there's another term over here that is also squared. So those two would go together, and since there's no number in front of the x squared right here, I know that that coefficient is 1, so I'm going to do negative 2 plus 1, and that gives me negative 1x squared, and I'm just going to write that as x squared. Alright, next I have a 6x, and then I have an x over here, and so I'm going to add 6 and a 1, which gives me 7x, and then I notice that negative 2 is a constant and has no other constant to go with it, and 3x to the 4th has no other like term either. So I'm just going to write those 2 terms down, the minus 2 and the positive 3x to the 4th. And now the only other thing we need to do, which you can do it while you're combining like terms, is make sure that we write our polynomial in the correct order, or in standard form. And that's when we begin with the highest exponent. So I need to write this, rearrange it, to have the highest exponent first. So I'm going to start with the 3x to the 4th, and then I have positive 6x cubed minus x squared plus 7x minus 2. And then I look at my polynomial and I make sure that none of these are like terms, and they are not. And I go in order from largest exponent to smallest exponent with a constant at the very end, and that is my final answer. So I'm going to put try to put a box with the arrow. Put a box around that as my final answer. Subtracting polynomials works much in the same way as addition. The only difference is I've got to distribute this minus sign right here to everything that comes behind it in the parentheses. So I'm going to give this minus sign to that guy, to that term, to that term, and to that term. Now giving a negative to those terms only changes their sign, or their positive negative characteristic. So this positive 2x to the 4th becomes minus 2x to the 4th. Minus 8x squared becomes positive. Negative 6x squared becomes positive. And positive 5 becomes negative. Nothing changes in the first parentheses, so I'm just going to rewrite it. Now this problem is exactly like we just did on the previous problem. We're just going to combine like terms. And this time I'm going to look for the highest exponent and go from there rather than put it in order after I combine. So my highest exponent is x to the 4th. And I notice that I have this x to the 4th. And so what I'm going to add together is the 3 and the negative 2, or you can think of it as 3 minus 2, which gives me 1x to the 4th. Remember, you don't have to write the 1. My next highest exponent is the negative 4x to the 3rd, and I notice that no other term has an exponent of 3. So that term is just going to be written next with nothing to combine it with, and I'm going to cross it out because I used it. My next exponent would be the squared term. So I have a positive 6x squared, a positive 8x squared, and a positive 6x squared. So I'm going to add together a 6 and an 8 and a 6. So that gives me 14 plus 6, which is 20x squared. And then finally, I have a constant, and I have a negative 1 and negative 5 that go together to make negative 6. So now looking at my final answer, I should be in order from highest exponent to lowest, and none of the remaining terms should be like terms. And they are not. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my answer. Now one thing I do want to point out to you is the way that I box my like terms or put shapes around them. Notice that I use a different shape for each set of like terms, and also that when I put the shape around it, I include the sign in front of it. A lot of times people will miss that sign, so on this one, instead of calling it a negative 2, they'll call it a positive 2, and that messes you up when you're combining your like terms. And to end the shortest video you've had so far, I have this little cartoon kind of thing, and I just want to make a couple of statements about it and give you a couple disclaimers. I realize that the word section is misspelled because this is English and not Spanish. And I also want to say that this right here, this drink, is completely alcohol free. I do not promote alcoholic beverages. See you tomorrow.